Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Deliberately Intentional with me, RemiFagbohun. Today's topic is in-laws. I had a couple this week specifically that their issue was literally their in-laws, and it prompted me to bring this up as a conversation piece in today's podcast. Their issue, simply put in a nutshell, without going into their business, is something that a lot of us have to deal with. One person's family, the wife, her family is very affluent. And because they're affluent, they don't have any need for too much interaction with their daughter's family. They see them every couple of weeks. Um, they live in this country with all of us, whereas the husband's family lives in Nigeria and they're not as affluent. So, of course, you can already tell where this is going. The husband wants to bring his family over. He wants them to live in their house. And of course, the wife is a little bit resistant because she's like, well, my family doesn't function this way, which truthfully they don't, because they've lived in America for their entire life there of this girl, and they've lived here this entire time, and they don't have any need to rely on their daughter for anything. So she's not accustomed to having older people in her home, in her business. And of course, the money that they have, her money has always been towards her family, things that she wants to do, and his family needs a lot more from him. And so they consistently keep bumping heads, and he started to keep secrets and like, you know what, if I can't have a conversation with you about how I want to deal with my family, then I'm just not going to tell you at all. So he would go ahead and do things for the family without involving her, and it's creating just a really big gap. He thinks that she's stuck up. She thinks that he's gullible. And literally, when we were trying to find that middle ground, it was just trying to get them to understand and see each other's point of view, which is the issue with a lot of people and their in-laws. Similar story. I didn't really see my mom get along really well with her in-laws either. My mom went through a lot trying to make my grandmother like her. She really wanted her approval. And till she died, she never got it. What I took from that was I'm not going to be chasing after anybody's approval. The main person that I need to deal with is my husband, and I'm not really going to pay too much attention to anyone else. That's the trauma that I took from my upbringing. But as I got older, I realized that that's not necessarily correct. I didn't have the best relationship with my mother-in-law. Why? We never really got to know each other. I mean, she passed before I could build on our relationship, but mainly because of my trauma, it created this wall that made it almost impossible for us to get past. Until I brought that wall down and came down to her level, then we had a relationship, but it was probably a couple of years before she died. I didn't realize how important she was to my husband because my husband didn't tell. There were stories about him and his mom that I didn't get to hear until much later, until after she had passed, actually. I didn't hear most of the stories about my mother-in-law until she had passed. I knew they had a good relationship a little bit from the little snippets, but then it took my husband years to be able to fully open up and tell me things about his past. So there was no way for me to know all of this stuff. This is the same problem that a lot of us have. We don't have, we expect our spouses to tell us everything. A lot of us sometimes are not even that aware of certain things. We don't understand the background dynamics. We simply understand our own. So, from where I was coming from, I knew what I knew, but I didn't think about the fact that I should have extended a lot more grace. These are the people, this is where my husband comes from. Like I extended it to his siblings. Like I tried to do my best. I didn't take anything that they would say too personal, as hard as that may be. But I can't say that I went out of my way the way I did when I finally realized how important it was to him. Now we're going to bring that back to you guys. Whether you like it or not, it's a really difficult space to be in when your past, which is your family, collides with your future, which is your spouse. Most of the time, it's a direct conflict because what you want or what your spouse wants from you and what your family wants from you is sometimes different. I always talk about the kind of mother-in-law that I plan on being, and it's because of all the things that I've seen happen that I'm saying I know how close I am to my son. I will embrace whoever he brings. I don't want to get ever put him in a position whereby he has to choose. And a lot of us are not thinking about the fact that your spouses came from somewhere. I know that you don't want them to be that involved, but depending on how their relationship is, it's kind of hard for you to dictate that. It's something you're going to have to observe, read the room, see what their relationship is like, and then create a space for yourself, or even create a whole new space whereby it's one that you exist, they exist, and you're all coming together. It shouldn't be them against you. It's all of you guys together. It shouldn't be a situation where you feel like you're the outsider. You're a part of the family as well. Granted, they've been at it a little longer than you. So, of course, their vibe is going to be completely different. It's going to seem like they're a clique, but you have a right to enter that clique and you have to own that. And that's for you to now realize that, you know what, as a woman and as a man, don't take it personal. Understand that your spouse came from somewhere. They are important to her or to him. And you also need to embrace them too, because it would make things easier for you both in the long run. You can look back on the relationship and say, oh my God, when mom was here and there, you know, all these little things that you were able to do. Your children are, remember, your children are a direct line from both sides of the family. So it would be great if they got to know both sides. But sometimes our emotions get in the way and it blocks the relationships that you would then look back on and wish that you had handled differently. So if you take anything away from today's episode, it's that it's not you against your in-laws, though I do understand how difficult that can be. It should be all of you guys together because you're all family. Learn not to take it so personal when they're not as welcoming. Remember, some of them are very conservative, some of them are super outgoing, some of them are going to be loud. You really have to understand the people you're dealing with. But remember that the love that you have for your spouse should extend to his family, no matter how obnoxious they may be. I'm not saying seek approval, but understand that if it's important to your spouse, it has got to become important to you, or it will become a conflict. Like the couple that I'm helping to deal with their issue right now, I'm helping them through it, but there's years of snide comments that the mother-in-law has made and snide comments that the daughter-in-law has made and snide comments that the son, like there's a whole bunch of disrespect going on and it gets harder and harder to get past it. One of my earliest memories with my mother-in-law, which probably created the gap between us in the first place, was when I had an issue and I went to go and meet her. I was expecting that my mother-in-law would, you know, embrace me. Again, I might have been a little naive, but I was expecting my mother-in-law to embrace me, tell me it was going to be okay, and you know what, like defend me as like, you know, women code. Yeah, she didn't do that. My mother, instead, she said, nope, my son does no wrong. There's nothing wrong with him. Everybody else is a problem, not him. And I just looked at this woman and I'm like, oh no, you're my problem. And believe it or not, for many years, I never forgot that incident. And that's a lot of people, by the way. You'll hear them say something in defense of their child, and you'll feel like, you know what, that means I'm a bad person, or you now saying there's something wrong with me. If nothing's wrong with your child, indirectly, you're basically pointing your finger at me. Yeah, and I held on to that for a very, very long time. It took me a while to realize that it's not that she wasn't talking to him on the side. I didn't hear that until many, many, many years later. But I guess now that I'm a parent too, I get that some people find it very difficult to acknowledge that their children make mistakes. I Now I look at it that we're all human. She probably at that point in time felt that I was critiquing her mothering skills or, yeah, just critiquing her child, which most people would take personal. But from that situation, I learned a lot. I learned something that I said I would never do as a parent myself. And it's that I'm not just going to necessarily just side my child for siding's sake. I'm going to be the one to correct him and also make sure that when anyone brings anything to me, I'm going to try to help them resolve. Because if I side with my son, I'm automatically pushing the other person away. One of the things that I'm proudest of is that before my mother-in-law died, when I realized how important it was to my husband, which, mind you, he did not tell me initially how important it was to him. But once he did mention that it was important, I took myself to go and meet her, and I tried to come down to her level. And when I say come down to her level, meaning that I took away all of these fancy pieces and I wore my rambuba and I went and I sat in her kitchen and tried the best way I could to bridge the gap that had formed between me being with her son for, I think at that point, maybe about 7 years, and we had very little contact. But I was able to bridge it to the point whereby at least she would look forward to me visiting. It would became a little bit easier for us to connect because I took away all the things that could distract. That's something you can do too. I'm not saying most people would prefer to look at these situations like, why do I need to do this and why do I need to change anything? But you need to make it easy for people to relate to you. If I went like this, all they're going to be distracted with is all the fact like, oh my God, she's so fancy. Automatically, they're going to be uncomfortable. And that's something that a lot of us don't know to do. When we say you're going to meet the person in the kitchen, I'm not saying that, oh, go and turn yourself into a slave. No, but go and meet people and create a middle ground. Super, super important. Because if your mother-in-law, for example, is cooking and is doing something and you're sitting with your feet up, it's seen as disrespectful in some cultures. So you also have to be able to read the room. But at the end of the day, one thing that you're going to probably not think about is the fact that these in-laws are not going to be around that long. Their time here is limited because the amount of time they spent with their kids up to the point when you enter their lives, it's very unlikely that they're going to have that same amount of time left. So if you look at the fact that I have a little amount of time, I want to take some of the history and pass on to their grandkids, which is your child, then you might want to invest in that relationship. That's how important it is. Thank you for joining me on another episode of Deliberately Intentional. Believe it or not, your in-laws are a part of your life. They're your family. Stop thinking about them as if they are against you. Remember that you guys are all one. Stay tuned for another episode on Wednesday. Bye.